When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing clinical social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 43. The journey is more about my death than it is about the cancer. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our daring guest, Rishma Dalla. Rishma is a 50-year-old married mother of 2 adult sons, and like many 50-year-olds, she has lived her half-century full of ups and downs. She has worked as an occupational therapist for over 28 years, and in the year 2020, Rishma decided to take the plunge into entrepreneurship. She has since started her own business called OT for Life and has been supporting clients through their rehabilitation and recovery process, encompassing all facets of an individual's needs from the standpoint of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual lenses. Rishma is also a cancer survivor and has begun her journey to share her story of her personal struggles as it relates to mental health, as she is inspired to empower others to share their stories. Rishma also provides workshops on stress management and has her very own YouTube channel where she posts videos about stress management. Well, hello, Rishma. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Very nice to be here, Salima. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh my goodness, the pleasure is mine, all mine. I am actually super excited to have you to come on as a guest on the show today. And I'm really thankful for your willingness to show up, to dare yourself to share. And I'm actually really thankful for your support. As you know, by doing so, you're taking a stance with me to help break barriers of mental stigma, which is a really important goal for me. So thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure and my honor.
Great. So Rishma, in case you're still wondering, the podcast is really about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether their struggle is directly about a mental health impact or something else. And one thing that we know is that no matter what an individual's story is all about, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which remains tucked away.
That is very true. And not just that, but it involves the family members as well, right? So not only does it impact the person themselves, but most often it impacts others around them as well.
Of course, it impacts the individual themselves as well as their family, their friends. It's the whole social circle. It could be in so many different contexts, right? So your work environment, your school environment, who you socialize with, and how that shows up and changes when you're impacted. So absolutely. And so I'm hoping to continue to have this platform to share these stories. I'm hoping that this platform will serve as a way, or that it is serving as a way to break the barriers of mental stigma that really have been conditioned in our society. So, with your company today and together, you and I hope it can be an opportunity for us to encourage people to both share and tell what people typically have hesitations for expressing. And of course, I am bringing forward a trend, and it's called the mental beauty rethink. What comes to mind for you when you hear the words the mental beauty rethink?
Oh, I love it because it actually brings to mind positivity and hope and optimism, right? And so
Hmm.
I love that you call it that. And I love that it takes the shape of such a positive movement, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
To shift your perspective to the positive. And everybody, no matter how far positive you are in your perspective, there's always room to shift a little bit more and a little bit more room for improvement. So I love it. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, another aspect of it is also just about a way for removing the shame, right? So,
Yeah.
one thing that I noticed is like when we talk about going to the doctor, right? We're talking about physical health, and people seem to be open to talking about that. But the moment you mention something about mental health, more often than not, I hear a lot of cringe or the room gets silent. All of a sudden, the vibration is a bit awkward. So, really hoping to normalize it and equalize it and realize that the two work hand in hand, they go together. And that's why the rethink, the mental beauty rethink. So, just, removing the shame from the picture.
Yeah. Love it.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, that being said, Rishma, I know today we are going to get into your compelling story. So, without further ado, I say we get rolling.
Okay. Sounds good.
So, for the first question, Rishma, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. How would it read?
I think, I'm just going to jump in there and say the headline would probably say, My Death, My Way.
My death, my way.
Yeah.
Okay. So, now without giving away too much about your story just yet, can you say a little bit more about my death, my way? What's coming up for you?
Yeah. And I think, it's a way to face our own mortality, and it's an approach to have some level of control over, what the end of your life might look like, no matter
Mm,
when it might happen, but some level of control in terms of what that might look like for you.
okay. That's a very interesting concept that I think needs more time for people to take to reflect and think about. I don't think it's a topic that we talk enough about. So, yeah, let's unpack more. So, tell us more about your untold story. What is it all about? What are you sharing with us today?
So, 10 years ago, when I was 40, I was diagnosed with cancer, and my kids were little, 10 and 14. And of course, when you hear the word cancer, it's synonymous with death, right? I mean, the first
Oh, yeah,
thing,
it's the big C.
yeah, anybody's head is, oh my God, I'm going to die, right? And
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm,
that's kind of where my death journey or journey with death started, and then just evolved because through knowing that this could actually mean my death sooner than I would like it to be,
mm-hmm,
had me asking a lot of questions and doing a lot of soul searching and
mm-hmm,
looking for ways that I could just maintain my own control over the things that were going on.
mm-hmm. And what was it like to get comfortably uncomfortable with the language surrounding death and dying?
Yeah, I think for me, I did a lot of reading and I did a lot of soul searching, and I
Mm,
really seeked out knowledge. I wanted to know as much as I possibly could about death and dying, and also kind of the spiritual aspects of death and dying. Where do we go after we die? What happens? All of that kind of stuff.
mm-hmm,
Because when I was growing up, we weren't ever allowed to actually talk about death. So
mm-hmm.
I showed up here with this, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And so just got busy and just really, really was seeking out as much knowledge as I possibly could.
So, what were your go to places for this knowledge, this searching that you were doing?
Yeah, so at the time, Oprah Winfrey and Deepak Chopra had started their 21-day
Y-
meditation series.
Yes, yes, that's right.
So one of my sisters-in-law told me about it. And so I started that. That was a really good starting point for me, just in terms of going inward and just trying to figure out, right? Like, what is it that I want to know? What is it that's important to me? Who am I as a person? And then I did a lot of reading. So, in a whole bunch of serendipities and coincidences that happened through my journey, I fell across certain books that just completely changed things for me. So, Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, and one of the books by Deepak Chopra. There's books by Gary Zukov, right? The Seed of the Soul. So lots and lots of books that I read, and just, whatever I could seek out, I did.
It seems like you were really very resourceful. I'm wondering if you are able to share a little bit more about, were there any other hiccups along the way? Were there other conflicts that you were facing, even if were they inner conflicts that were coming up for you? Anything else that you can share about your story?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that my panic wasn't about necessarily that I was going to die. Although that was more like, oh, I don't want to yet. Like, it was
Right,
more like, I'm not ready to go.
right.
But my panic was more actually about my kids, right? It was like, oh my gosh, like, no, I can't. I can't go. Like, I need to be here. I need to be here for my kids, because they were only 10 and 14, right?
Right.
So for me, it was really that was sort of the panic and the terror around facing my death, is like, what will happen to my kids? And so that consumed me for a little bit. And then as you go through the cancer treatments and stuff, and as I found out about the stage of cancer and the prognosis and whatnot, then it put those things a little bit more at ease. It wasn't a terminal cancer. That kind of thing made things easier. But at the same time, I didn't stop the search. I wanted to continue the search about death and dying, because I realized that, hang on a second, I mean, I'm facing my own death because I have a cancer diagnosis, but really I should be facing my own death anyways, because whether you have a terminal cancer diagnosis or not, I mean, I could just get hit by a bus tomorrow and die. So there is no
Right.
guarantee in terms of how long our lives are going to be. So it
Right.
really is very important to make sure that you're thinking about your death and really taking into consideration how you want to live.
Wow. It's so true. I know that many of us have it in the back of our minds about, there's a lot of fear around dying, but it's such a natural part of life. And you're right, we're not invincible.
Yeah,
And there are different things that we could face, whether it's a long chronic journey or something acute or something absolute sudden and out of nowhere, right? There's no way for planning it, but it doesn't mean that we can't engage with what that process would be like. It sounds
absolutely.
like you did that, right? So I'm curious with a little bit about, now I know that it's your cancer journey that was one aspect, and you've already shared that it went well deeper than that and
Yeah.
got you to the soul searching place. But if we could just take a step back for a second or for a moment, and if you're able to share, if you're comfortable, any difficult moments with the cancer diagnosis or journey or treatment that you recall experiencing.
Yeah, there was two moments that I will never forget. One moment was after my second chemotherapy, because that's when my hair was literally falling out in chunks.
Mm-hmm.
And although everybody told me, I chose to just be in denial and
Mm-hmm.
think like, no, it's not going to happen to me. So when it started to happen to me, and then my sister-in-law at the time, she's a hairdresser, and so she had come and she gave me a buzz cut, and I've always had long, thick, luscious
Mm-hmm.
hair,
Mm-hmm.
and losing my hair and looking at myself in the mirror, even though I thought I was mentally prepared for it,
Mm-hmm.
that was really, really hard, because I didn't realize until then how much my hair actually was a part of my identity, of who I am and how I feel about myself, right? So that was really difficult. And then the other thing about
Mm-hmm.
the second chemotherapy was
Mm-hmm.
the side effects I started to feel more after the second
Like
chemotherapy.
physical side effects?
Physical side effects, like I had bone pain, and I
Mm.
had muscle pain, and I had headaches, and I had burning in my digestive system.
Mm.
And I remember just looking at my husband and saying, I don't think I could do this another 6 times. Like, I just don't think that I can. So it was a really low point, and that was very, very difficult for me.
Mm-hmm. And so, how did you move through that piece? It must have been so difficult if we go back to both of those moments. If we go back to the first one that you shared, and having your hair fall out in chunks. I heard you say Yes, there was like the denial that I was experiencing full on, right?
Yeah.
And so when you held those chunks of hair in your hand, like what was going through your mind? Like what was it? Can you tell us more about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. It was still, I think, a denial because I remember thinking to myself, this can't be real. Like this cannot be happening right
Right.
now. Like you've got to be kidding me. I think that I still was in that denial until I just kind of went, just cut it off, just shave it off. It's fine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just let's just get rid of it. Because actually having my hair fall out in chunks in my hand was, I think, for me more traumatic than had I just cut my hair super, super short, say in a pixie cut or something
Mm-hmm.
like that before that second chemotherapy. So for me, that's good learning that I mean, I should have probably done that because I didn't realize how traumatic it would have been for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when I was in the shower and I was washing my hair and I just was like, oh my goodness. And it was scary, right? Because
Right.
I've never experienced that before. So it was a very, very scary place to be.
You know, the thoughts that you're sharing with me, it almost reminds me of going back to discussions around mindfulness and self compassion and the idea of letting go of resistance, right? And
Yeah.
that whole
Yeah.
piece about acceptance and that whole piece about acceptance where, like, we might not like what's happening, but if we can acknowledge that it's happening and if we can let go of the fact that things aren't exactly the way we want them to be, then we can come to a more accepting place. But it seems like there was just probably a lot that you were digesting and processing and a lot that must have been going on in your mind even prior to that second chemo treatment. I can only imagine that there was so many new things that you were experiencing and new things that you had to think about or new thoughts that you had to entertain.
And I think, one of the things that was also like I was in survival mode.
Mm,
I really and truly was. I was just in survival mode.
mhm,
I was like, I can't process those feelings and emotions right now. I
mhm,
can't give them too much
mhm,
space because I have to focus on what needs to
mhm.
be done. So, although I had those experiences when I lost my hair, I still feel like I pushed myself back into that survival mode and pushed myself to go, you know what it is. And it's only temporary and my hair will grow back. And this is just what needs to happen in order for me to go through this treatment and get back to my life.
Yeah, right. And sometimes we need to shift gears, but it also sounds like you knew it was going to be temporary.
Yeah, and I think that part of it is just because I'm in healthcare, right? Like I have that knowledge and I do
Mhm.
understand that it is temporary. So I think that for me actually was more of a help than it was a
Right.
hindrance because sometimes when you're in healthcare, it's not good
Of course.
because you might know too
Right.
much and then, like, so it can work in the opposite direction. But for me, I think it was better. I think it was an advantage. And I think that it helped me to sort of calm down and realize that yeah, I just got to deal with this right now, and
Mhm.
that my kids are watching me and I just need to try and be as strong as I can
Right.
for them.
So now I know you had all this health knowledge, but I'm curious. Let me ask you this question. While you told yourself this is temporary, did you actually believe it? Or was that what you were just telling yourself that you needed to tell yourself?
I think when it came to my hair, yes, I believed that it was
Okay.
temporary and I believed that my hair would grow back. In terms of the actual cancer, yeah, that took a long, long time for
Hmm.
me to sort of accept that, okay, it's behind me. Like it was even after all my treatments were done and stuff. That's when I really started to process everything that I'd gone
Hmm.
through, right?
Hmm.
And then it took some time after that to really come to a place where I was like, yeah, okay, I can now say that it's behind me and I can move on.
Right. So, are there other aspects of your journey, whether it's through the cancer, the toll that it took on your mental health, or the journey with your hair loss, and how all of this translates to a lot of the soul searching that you embarked on? Are there any other aspects of your story that you're recalling that would be helpful for you to share?
I recognized that I was starting to lose hope.
Hmm.
And that was really scary for me because I've always been really like optimistic and positive and hopeful. And so when I had started to lose hope, it was actually a really scary time for me because I didn't really know how to deal with that.
Hmm.
And then I kind of had this like flash of a thought of maybe life would be better if I weren't here. Maybe I'm just
Right.
too much trouble for everybody. Like I had
Hmm.
a flash of that
Yeah,
thought.
these flashing passive thoughts of not wanting to be around.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, I picked up the phone. I called my social
Hmm.
worker at the cancer care clinic and let her know, like, listen, I'm having thoughts that I'm finding scary. And so I think I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And she was wonderful. And I went in the next day. We talked about it. She contacted the oncologist. I got on some antidepressant medication and I started some counseling. And that was the best thing that I could have done.
So when you started that counseling, is that when you would have started to process some of what you were experiencing?
So part of what my social worker felt would be really good for me and therapeutic for me was actually starting a blog, because she knew that I was in healthcare and she knew that my natural instinct is just to help other people. And so she kind of approached it from that perspective, that if I wrote a blog about what I was experiencing, then that could actually help other people who might be going through similar experiences.
And writing is therapeutic as well. Did you find that it was therapeutic?
Absolutely. And so I don't think she necessarily made it that obvious to me, but as I was writing it, I realized that she was absolutely right. And it was so incredibly therapeutic. And so, yeah, it was, I think, through the writing process and all of the soul searching that I was embarking on and all the books I was reading and the meditation I was doing, it was all kind of culminating together to really help me to process some of what I was going through. And actually, that was a little bit later in my journey. And it was more of a looking back perspective. And so, yeah, definitely it was incredibly therapeutic.
So, Rishma, when people come to see me in the therapy room, individuals tend to be in one of three places. Sometimes they're getting started on their journey and they're trying to figure out where to start, what points to pick. Some people are in the thick of things. They're really in the middle of their journey and they're needing support right then and there. And some people are looking back, sometimes looking back, trying to get closure, or looking back, trying to put all the pieces together. And some people are looking back because it's a way for them to be able to move forward. What part of the journey would you say that you are in? Would you say that you're getting started, in the middle, looking back?
I'm definitely looking back, and it's something that I don't constantly think about. So I don't constantly remind myself that I've had cancer. It's just not something that I believe is going to be helpful to me, but it's definitely something that I am aware has completely changed my life and has changed who I am and kind of how I live now. So yeah, definitely looking back, and looking back with a lot of gratitude.
I like that. I like that you're able to piece that together. And I'm just curious, what would you want to remember about the process of your healing journey?
I think the thing that I do remember is, oh shoot, I hope I don't start crying.
Or just take a moment and breathe. It's all right.
Yeah, is family, the love and support of my family. So it was, my husband, my two sons, my parents, my brothers and their families, my sisters-in-law, my in-laws, like it was everybody, right? And the family support that I got and the love that I got from my family is really what got me through. Like that's what got me through. And so I think that that's something I don't ever want to forget. So I'm happy to forget what the biopsy felt like. I'm happy to forget what the surgery felt like. I'm happy to forget all of those things. But I hope I never, ever forget the love and support of my family, because that was the most meaningful part of that journey for me.
The love and support of your family was part of the process of your healing journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really beautiful. And I know that you started to sort of segue into the things that you're really grateful for and expressions of gratitude. Can you tell me more about the gratitude? What would you say that you're grateful for with encountering this journey of your untold story? Not just the cancer, but the part about the hair loss, fighting with moments of depression, the soul searching. Can you say more about the gratitude?
Yeah, for sure. Because you can't appreciate the light until you've been in the dark, right? And so that's what I really, really, really am thankful for. When I look back, I wouldn't have changed anything. And I would go through it all over again if I had to. So there's nothing that I would have changed, because every single experience that I had through my journey, one of which was actually meeting my best friend and then helping her through her cancer journey, helping her through her end of life journey, and then finally saying goodbye to her when she passed away. That was all part of my journey as well. So I wouldn't change anything because every single moment taught me so many different things about myself,
Mm-hmm.
who I am as a person, what my worth and value is. It's not connected to my physical appearance. It's not connected to my hair, right?
Right.
It's connected to who I am as a person deep down
Mm-hmm.
inside and how I love and care for and appreciate the people around me, right?
Yeah.
It also really taught me that you want to make sure that you live in a way that you want to be remembered after you're gone. So what I mean by that is,
Mm-hmm.
so that's a question that I started to actually ask myself is how do I want to be remembered when I'm gone? Because that's one of the questions you have to ask yourself when you're facing your death,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how do I want to be remembered after I'm gone, whether it's tomorrow or whether it's 20 years from now? And if I want to be remembered as being forgiving and compassionate and understanding and patient, well, then am I living that way right now? Because if I died tomorrow and I'm not living that way right now, then I'm certainly not going to be remembered that way,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really important way for me to start thinking about, who I am and who I actually want to be,
Mm-hmm.
and what my own soul journey is here and what my purpose is here, other than being obviously a mother and a daughter and a wife and things, but
Mm-hmm.
really what am I doing here? Like, what is my purpose
Mm-hmm.
here in this life?
Mm-hmm.
And then just living my life to live my purpose.
Living life to live my purpose. That's so insightful. The entire process of what you just shared, you know, I'm just sitting here in awe that you just described a beautiful process that you really reflected on. How do I want to be remembered? And so let me list what that's like after I'm gone. How do I want to be remembered? I want to be remembered by all these characteristics and qualities. Okay, so am I living that way or not? You really did a sound check for yourself.
And I continue to do that. That's a process that I continue to follow because, we, as human beings, we forget,
Yeah,
right? We
of
forget
course.
and we go back to our old ways
Mm-hmm.
sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when I find myself being a little bit grumpy or a little bit judgmental, then I remind myself and I ask myself, like, how do I want to be remembered? And am I living that way right
Mm-hmm. I think I'm gonna take your question and ask myself this on a daily basis
now?
now. Yeah, it's a really great, insightful way of living and living life with
Yeah.
intention. I've really, really enjoyed hearing that. I've been enjoying the entire conversation, but that's really something that at least is even as a takeaway for me too. And so I'm curious now, bringing the mental health spin back here, how has your untold story affected your mental health? Like, I know that we've touched upon the parts about how when you started to have those like passive thoughts of maybe it's better if I'm not around. And, those thoughts that got you to sort of reach out to your social worker and going through some of the fear. Can you say more about what other emotions you experienced? Or did you have competing thoughts that were happening at the same time internally that you're experiencing?
I think for me, the biggest emotion that I really actually tried to hold on to the entire way was gratitude. It was actually thankfulness. I
Mm-hmm.
I was grateful all the
Mm-hmm.
time, and I would always have this big sigh. When you're so grateful that you actually sigh because like you're just so thankful.
Mm-hmm.
I would do that all the time. But there were moments where I was exhausted and there were moments where I was like, oh my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
what is my life going to look like? And there were moments where I was scared. I was scared more about my kids, right? What
Mm-hmm.
will my kids do if I don't survive this? What will my kids do if I'm not around? And so some of my time definitely was spent, a lot of my time actually was spent planning because again, I was in survival
Mm-hmm.
mode. And so that was kind of part of my survival toolkit, I guess, was okay, so I'm in this situation. What can I do? How can I problem solve? How can I get through this? Because I wanted to make sure that the time that I had where I could be very productive because the time will pass anyways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the way I looked at it was, okay, I need to plan for my death. So at the age of 40, had my will done, took pictures of my
Mm-hmm.
jewelry, decided which jewelry goes to who, talked to my family about, my wishes if I were ever to not be able to speak for myself medically, talked to the boys about things, did all of that kind of stuff. And sometimes that took me into a really scary, like sad place,
Yeah,
right? Because
you're
I
facing a
would
lot.
always go
Yeah.
back to like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do this right now. Like, I don't want to think about this. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like, nope, I'm going to do it, because once it's done, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't have to worry about it. So if something
Mm-hmm.
happens to me tomorrow, I know everything is
Mm-hmm.
done. All the decisions are made. I made all
Mm-hmm.
my lists. I made everything. It's all done. And my kids know exactly where the information is and all of that stuff. So I think that I went through a lot of emotions, and it was definitely a roller coaster ride. But I think that once I was able to get the help for the depression, then it was kind of like that was my lowest dip.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just started to come back up again. And, I have to say that for me
Mm-hmm.
personally, I'm no longer on the medications and I'm no longer doing counseling, but it's a daily commitment,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
To look after my mental health and well-being. It's a daily reminder to pray, to meditate,
Mm-hmm.
to do some deep breathing, to do some yoga, to go for a walk, to look at what I'm grateful for. And the other thing that I've really, I guess, realized is that when my emotions do start sliding
Mm-hmm.
backwards a little bit, I'm getting a lot better at recognizing
Mm-hmm.
it quickly and then asking myself, okay, so when was the last time that I meditated? Right. And you can always tell, like, oh geez, yeah, it's been like a week
Mm-hmm.
or two.
Yeah.
So yeah, no wonder,
Right.
right? When was the last time you exercised? Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. The
So
reminders.
so it's good.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that is what sort of keeps me on track, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is knowing and understanding that it's a daily commitment and it's something that I have to work at every
Every
single day.
single day, a daily commitment. So I want to ask you this question, Rishma. I know in a private conversation, you did mention that there was a depression that you experienced before cancer. I'm wondering if you can highlight if there was any differences in the experience that you had for the depression that you experienced pre-cancer journey and post-cancer journey. Anything that stood out to you?
Yes, the depression that I was experiencing prior to my cancer was more about like a dissatisfaction with my life, just a sense of what am I doing here? I'm not happy. That journey actually took a lot longer for me to bounce back from than
Mm-hmm.
when I was going through my cancer,
Mm-hmm.
because that took a lot of counseling and really a lot of unpacking about what was going on for me and why did I feel this
Mm-hmm.
way and what was it that I was actually looking for, and how would I be able to achieve that for myself. So that was a little bit of a longer
Mm-hmm.
journey, but it was one that I was able to again sort of come out of, in the sense of I was able to, wean off of the medications and eventually stop the counseling and sort of get back to my life and got into a good regular rhythm of the good stuff and exercising and all of that stuff, but not to the extent that I was after my cancer.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. So, Rishma, what are the key messages, or what is your key message to the listeners of the show? What do you want them to know?
I really want to say, don't be so afraid to die that you don't even actually fully allow yourself to live.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are so many people out there that are just so afraid to die that they won't eat the foods that they love, or they won't go on that skydiving adventure, or, they're just so afraid to die that they won't actually live. And
So, indulge in life.
exactly. And I think that it's a two-part statement, is that if you are afraid to die, then really take the time to figure out why.
Yeah. Get curious. Get curious about it, right?
Exactly. And do your own soul searching and come to a place where you're not afraid to die. So like, I'm not afraid to die. That doesn't mean that
That you
I want
want
to die.
to,
Like, I'm
right?
not ready to die.
Right.
I have lots to do. I still want to, watch my kids graduate and, get married, and I want to be a grandmother.
Of
So there's
course.
lots that I still want to do, but when that time comes, I'm not going to be scared about it, right? I know that we all die. Nobody will get out of that one. So that's okay. And actually, dying is not a punishment. Dying is actually a celebration. That's what I would say, is just don't be so afraid to die. And if you are afraid to die, try to find out why
Hmm.
and just live your life as fully as you can.
Yeah. I really like those words. It feels like this kind of just exemplifies how much you've journeyed through this.
Yeah, and I think that that was a little bit purposeful on my part. I was looking at this as my second chance at
Hmm.
life.
Hmm.
So if I'm looking at this as my second chance at life, I don't want to screw it up. I want to do it right,
Hmm.
and I want to do it the best way that I can. And so that's where I just searched so deep and got all the answers to my questions, and then got back to life, but a different life and a different me and just a better me. I feel like I'm in total alignment now in terms of my thoughts, my feelings, and my actions. And it took a long time for me to get there, but I'm so, so glad that the last 10 years I've been able to live that way in alignment.
Right. Amazing. Really amazing and inspiring. And it's a very articulate journey. I'm just, again, just sitting in the awe, in the place of awe.
No.
So I am curious about, what was your game changer inspiration that's close to you that reflects your untold story? So I know there were a number of things that you came across, but was there any specific like inspirational quote or book, a mantra, a person, people, an event, a place?
I think there is a quote that I tend to repeat often, not just to myself, but to others. And that quote is, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yes.
And that comes from a place of, when you're having a conversation and you have a certain belief about something, and you've had this belief all your life, and then somebody says something and you kind of go,
Right.
I never thought about it that way before.
Yeah, this is a very powerful quote. Another guest on the show also said this very quote was so important for them. And of course, I can see why.
And because what it is that when you realize that you yourself have had that moment where you've believed something all your life, and then somebody tells you something and you go, oh, geez, like I never thought about it that way before. And you realize that you kind of like wasted all of that time thinking about something in a certain way, and not allowing yourself to see other perspectives.
Yes.
Right. And that is so important, because when you allow yourself to open up and see other perspectives, then you actually start to understand your life so much better. You start to understand the people around you so much better. And things like anger and resentment and jealousy and all of that stuff just kind of fades away, because you're able to actually open yourself up to more than just one perspective.
And I like that. It's not just that you're switching from one perspective to another, you're just opening up to more perspectives.
Yeah, because there are definitely two sides to a story, but typically there are even more than two sides.
So
And so if
many.
you're able to actually understand all of the different layers in every situation, then it just helps so much more to just go through life. It just makes life so much more joyful and more enjoyable, I
Yes,
think.
you can embrace more of the spontaneity as well.
Absolutely.
So, what would be a cause or an organization that has been impactful to you on your journey that you would like to give a shout out to?
For me, I mean, the cancer agency here in BC has been fantastic. And that's where I went for my treatments, well, for my radiation treatments, anyways. And then, of course, I live in the city of Richmond here in BC, and the Richmond Hospital Cancer Care Clinic was just fantastic.
Amazing.
The whole team was just absolutely amazing through my journey. So I really appreciate them. And then, I really appreciate the knowledge that I was able to seek. So, I so appreciate all the books that I read, and I so appreciate all the meditations that I did. And there's just kind of so much that I'm grateful for that allowed me to go through my journeys.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. So, how can people connect with you if they would like to? What are your handles, or what platforms are you findable on?
I'm actually pretty easy to connect with, because I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and I have my website, and I've got my YouTube channel. So lots of different ways to get a hold of me. If you just Google Rishma, you'll probably be able to find me that way.
Well, we're going to grab all of your handles and those links, and we will add them to the show notes page. So you will definitely be findable from the Dare to Share site. Okay.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much.
And so guess what, Rishma?
We did.
You just dared yourself to share. Congrats, my dear.
Thank you. Thank you. This was such a pleasure and a real, real honor.
But tell me, what was that experience like? Did you feel like you were in the hot seat or anything?
Before we started, yes, I was nervous. And like I had told you, I couldn't really figure out why I was nervous, but you put me at ease. And yeah, no, this has just been a really good conversation between two people that is just an open and honest and authentic conversation. So that just put me at total ease. And it was a good experience. And it's one that I would welcome again.
And I just want to convey, Rishma, just how gracious I am to have been able to have this raw conversation with you, tapping into the depth of your soul searching experience after coming to heads with the scary cancer diagnosis and all the mental health impacts, and also about all the risks that you have taken up until today and the risks that you have taken today to share with such articulation and depth. I know, and I believe that it can only be encouraging for others to hear your story and come forward in their own way to share what is their right to share. So thank you for that conversation and for all the daring and for all your sharing.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So once again, Rishma, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.